Good morning, this is David Johnson, and today I'd like to talk about stress reports. So you ask, well, why would I want to look at stress reports? Well, I've done some optimization here as an example I talked about in other tutorials, and I've got some wrinkling and dimpling analysis, and I have some margins here, and yep, the answers are probably correct, but only if I press the right button. So there's a few things that we'd want to go and check, because we'd want to make sure that, if we go look in here, a few things that could happen. First of all, the element-based loads, or we're using statistical loads. When we go and look at the analysis, we want to check that what loads were actually used to calculate the margin. And so the reason we look at the stress report is to validate our answer. And it's just like, hey, I wrote some analysis and I just want to go and check the details to see if we use the correct variables and validate that we got the correct answer. So we go to here and we say, okay, I've got the minimum margin for wrinkling, it's 0.08. I need to go validate that, so we go up here to stress reports, and there's several different types. There's an Excel spreadsheet, there's a Word document, and there's a margin analysis detail. Now, sometimes I find this margin analysis detail to be a little easier to read. It's simply just a list of variables, and it states what variables we use. And usually what I do is I find the equation from the methods document, and I go and hand crank. I find all the variables and I go and hand crank myself, and I actually figure out what the answer is. This Word document is supposed to be a stress report. It's kind of a stress report. I wouldn't call it a classic aerospace stress report, but there's some useful information here that you can maybe cut and paste into your Word stress report, assuming that your corporation writes a stress report. And this Excel spreadsheet just provides some detailed information, etc., etc. So let's go look at the Word document first. This is probably the first place I look. And what we have here is a lot of options. I've been using this for several years. I think this option for stress reports been around for at least 6 or 7 years. I still haven't really figured all this out. Maybe it's because I'm lazy, or I think somehow this needs to be more rational. The only way I can really understand and figure this out is to go and check some of these boxes off and on, and then go and write a stress report and really figure out what's going on. So that said, I usually just leave everything on because it's too difficult to figure out any other option. This is new since I last used, or at least since I used stress reports. This is good, something I asked for a long time ago. You know, check by, prepared, blah blah. It's pretty good. So at least it gives a nice template. By the way, I know it's a very advanced topic. You can actually make your own stress report templates. It's something I always wanted to do. I was really interested in doing, because this brings efficiency. It brings huge efficiency if I can actually generate a stress report that's in a format that's acceptable to my corporation. The standard Hypersizer stress report probably wouldn't be quite high enough standard for most corporations. But anyway, what I'm saying is, if you wanted to dig around, you can actually write your own stress report, put the template back into Hypersizer, and generate a much more specific stress report with your own text, because all you're doing really is exporting a bunch of variables. So we'll generate this report, and it generates, initializes, and unfortunately, sadly, I got an error. I'm not quite sure what that error is, so we will go back and we'll try and generate a margin report. And unfortunately I have an error with this too. Not quite what I expected. Now I researched this, and the first thing that you need to look at, obviously the Microsoft error thing's kind of worthless, it doesn't really tell you much. But the first thing to check are two things. Number one, what version of Microsoft you're using. And I think that Collier supports 2003, 2007, maybe even 2010. I'm using 2003, and the first thing I go check is in my associations to check that my .doc and my .docx is defaulted to Microsoft Word, which it is. So I don't really know why I got an error, and I don't want to belabor on this point, but you know, I got these errors probably 6 or 7 years ago. And I know that it's not that easy to do this, because you're booting up another application, everyone's computer setup is different. But I think what we do need is to have a little bit more help. It needs to be, and also the error message needs to mean something, just to inform me, well, what have I done wrong here? There's a bunch of basic things that may not be set up correctly on this computer. So in summary, you know, we do need these stress reports, but I think it brings me back to the basic assumption here is we've done some analysis. Hypersizer has shown some margins, but really Hypersizer is an analysis tool in a software box. And so it's doing a lot of cool stuff behind the scenes. But I really do think it's important to bring out all the variables in the analysis and show it on the screen. We need to see it real time rather than having to dig around these stress reports and try and find what's going on. And unfortunately in my case the stress report doesn't work, so we end up with a bit of an issue. But if I give the best analogy I have is, you know, if we go to Patran, which I'm not a big supporter of Patran, but let's just say we do a free body diagram. And you know, we have an expectation in Patran that when I do a free body diagram, I see the picture on the screen, I see all the forces, and I can see exactly what's going on. In other words, the screen shows what I need. If when I clicked to do a free body diagram and Patran exported a JPEG file with a picture of the forces and then a text file with all the forces listed out, and I have to go now out of Patran to go and figure out what I really wanted to see on the screen, it's kind of, I mean, obviously it works, but it's not the ideal. And I think, in summary, Hypersizer is a wonderful product. It's got tremendous power, it's got a lot of investment, but the investment's not being put into the interface, the investment's being put into the features in the background. And in reality, if this is really a stress tool, we really need to see the equations and the variables on the screen. And so, a little unfortunate that it didn't work today, but I'm going to publish this anyway. Maybe I'll update it and say something a bit more positive later on, but that's unfortunate. So thanks very much. I'm sorry we didn't get to see much of the stress reports. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.